Chapter 27. Price of Freedom. The midday sun hung low overhead, forcing Svetya to shade her eyes with a gloved hand. Beneath her, Moknadi grumbled as they trudged down the wide, dusty street. "I know," Svetya murmured, touching his heavy shoulder. "This is no time of day for someone with a fur coat." Moknadi snorted, kicking up dust. Svetya rolled her eyes. "I said I was sorry. I thought the marshals could help. How was I to know that the sheriff had never seen an armored bear before?" Moknadi snorted again, but this time with pride. Svetya smiled. Moknadi had been gifted to her as a cub. They had grown up together, and learned to rely on one another through hardship. Leaning down towards his ear, she said, "Let's cut through the alley. We have no time to lose, and it may be cooler between the buildings." The mouth of the back street was barely wide enough for Moknadi's bulk, but Svetya coaxed him forward into the welcome shade. As they neared the exit, Svetya spied a barrel sitting in the alley's mouth, blocking their way out. More delays, she thought, frustrated. With a tap of her foot, Moknadi halted, and Svetya slid to the ground. As she did, there was a crack, and splinters flew from the wall next to her head. Ducking, Svetya's hand darted to her belt as Moknadi let out a harsh, warning growl. "Damn it!" a man hissed. She heard the heavy noise of a rifle being readied, and Moknadi's growl grew louder. "What do you want?" she asked, gripping the handle of her father's hunting knife. Her heart was pounding in her ears as she tried to steady her breathing. Calm. "Just you," the assassin laughed. "Seems you went and made yourself some dangerous enemies. We're getting a fair bit for your pretty head. Now turn around." "The Cabal," Svetya cursed inwardly. "Bara warned me." Moknadi's growl had fallen to a low rumble. He looked up, meeting Svetya's gaze as she turned to face her attacker. "What about alive?" she asked. "Funny, that," the man said. "The buyer didn't seem to care." Squinting down the barrel of his gun, he added, "Nothing person—" "Duck!" Svetya shouted, charging forward. With one hand she drew her knife, as the other hand slapped the barrel upwards, away from her and Moknadi. The gun barked, and pain seared across her palm. The gunman cursed, dropping the rifle and reaching for the pistol at his hip. Moknadi's roar shook the walls of the alleyway as the bear launched himself over Svetya, flattening the assassin before he could draw. He wheezed, air rushing from his lungs, before something inside snapped. Moknadi bellowed, pressing down with a heavy paw. "Stop!" Svetya called, squeezing past the bear's flank. Moknadi turned to her, looking at her questioningly. "Stop," Svetya said again, trying to catch her breath. "He can't answer questions without his ribs." Moknadi huffed, raised his paw slightly. Gasping, the assassin started to curse, until Svetya leaned down and held the knife against his chin. "Who set the bounty?" she spat. "I don't know. Never know. Got it through a contract," the assassin grunted. When Svetya did not immediately reply, he added, "No need to use that blade there, miss. This was just business." "There are many in Koso who would think me weak for not killing him," Svetya grimaced. "And if I let him live, will he try again? Killing him would be the quickest solution." As she struggled with what to do, a detail from her earlier talk with the sheriff stood out in her memory. "What about you?" she asked, looking down. "Pardon?" The assassin frowned. Svetya smiled. "What's the price on your head?" The doors to the tavern slammed open as a man, hog-tied and worse for wear, was thrown into the dingy room. A bear's roar punctuated his rough landing as a slim blonde woman with a red scarf walked through the still swinging doors. "Who wants to collect an easy bounty?" Svetya asked, bandaged hand on her hip. The few patrons at the barroom tables gawked. Drinking stopped. and cards were laid down for a moment. "Those are two of my favorite words," a gruff voice rumbled from the bar. Svetya turned to see a large, muscular man leaning over the bar. His worn leather duster was pulled away from the large revolver at his hip, and there was a heavy sword slung over one shoulder. Empty glasses lined the bar next to him. Svetya nodded at the groaning figure. "Here's a Cabal contract killer. I'll split his price with you, 50-50. "After you went to all the trouble to wrangle him?" The bounty hunter raised an eyebrow. Svetya shrugged. "The sheriff and I had a disagreement earlier over my mount. I'd rather someone else turn him in." "I've been there," the man drawled, nodding slightly. "Name's Jack." "Svetya." Svetya returned the nod. "Have you been taking bounties long?" Jack snorted. "You could say that." Svetya trailed off. "I'm running out of options," she thought. "Every day we spend searching for help is a day Yushkov stays in power." "I'm also looking to hire guns. Perhaps." "I don't do that kind of thing," Jack cut her off flatly. "No, not killing. Not like him," Svetya said, stumbling over her words. "It's to return to my homeland, Kosovo. It was taken from me." She looked down. "I don't have much more than what this bounty will pay, but when we take back the palace and royal treasury, I can pay you 10 times over." "If Yushkov has left anything behind," she added to herself. Jack stared, silent. "Please," Svetya said quieter. "My people are suffering. I can't help them on my own." Jack didn't reply, running a calloused thumb along the edge of the sword on his back. "I don't do that kind of thing anymore," he repeated brusquely, standing up. With one hand, the bounty hunter reached down to pick up the bound killer, who began to complain. "I'll take this parcel to the marshals," Jack said over the swearing man. "I can get the Cabal to lay off too if you like. Me and them go ways back." "Yes, thank you," Svetya said, following the man outside. Moknadi looked up from a water trough as Jack walked past. The bounty hunter gave the bear an odd look and tossed the bound man over the back of a nervous-looking horse. "If you won't help," Svetya pressed, desperation seeping into her voice, "do you know anyone I could find?" "You don't need hired guns," Jack said, pulling a crumpled piece of paper from his saddlebag. "You need believers who will fight for lost causes." Svetya started to say. "Lucky for you," Jack continued, turning to face Svetya. "I just might know a guy." Milos, Unwavering Idealist. The wind-worn walls of the canyon glowed, reflecting an orange sunset as Milos picked his way along a precarious trail. The bounty hunter's terse message had elicited a wry smile. Jack continued to surprise him. "Met someone who reminded me of you a lot. Svetya. She's in a tight spot. Could use help. Meet her at the old caves. Pack a scarf." Milos had been in Argenport when he heard of the Kossel coup. Word was that the new Orin had installed himself by force and ruled by terror. That sort of thing didn't sit right with Milos. Never had. It was a family trait. If he could act and change things, he had to. Many of his friends had moved on or didn't want to start a fight that wasn't theirs. But a few of his veterans remembered what it felt like to live under an iron fist. They had already decided they would not let Kossel suffer as Argenport had. And then Jack's note. So here I am, Milos thought, stepping past a large sandstone boulder to find an old friend, the entrance to a large cave hidden in the shadow of the canyon wall. Hoped I'd never have to see this place again, Milos mused, walking down a short tunnel. The old hideout was a lofty cavern scattered with the remains of long-dead campfires. Cracks in the ceiling let fading sunlight pool on the sandy floor. It still stank of sweat and stone powder, though that could be more from his memories. Once this cave had been lined with weapons and packed with rebels. Milos's rebels. Every one of them cocky, nervous, and eager to fight. Should be dark by now. I wonder if she'll show. From his pack, Milos pulled out a weathered map of Kosal and unrolled it across a large crate, picking a rusty lantern off the ground for a closer look. Striking a match on his boot, he lit the lantern carefully. Flickering light filled the corner of the empty cavern. Placing the lantern next to the map, Milos leaned back against the familiar stone and let the memories wash over him. He did not have long to wait. As sunlight faded from the cavern, the clank of armor and grunt of some kind of beast echoed down the winding canyon. As footfalls came from the mouth of the cave, Milos reflectively checked his pistols and smoothed out the maps. I wonder if she understands what she's asking, Milos thought, for us to put our lives on the line. The figure that stepped into the light was young. Damn. Did I start that young too? Milos thought, rising and extending a hand. You must be Svetya. I'm Milos. She was slight of build, pale and blonde, with a red scarf that tied her hair. She pulled off a leather glove to shake his hand, and her grip was strong, her gaze wary. Milos noted the hunting knife on her belt. Thank you for this meeting. She gestured towards the cave ceiling. Jack told me you could help. You here by yourself? Milos grunted, hand on his holster, scanning the tunnel behind her. Svetya crossed her arms. No. My men are keeping watch outside. They'll be in here at the first sounds of a fight, or if I don't check in with them in 15 minutes. Milos raised an eyebrow, frowning. I know Jack told you to come alone. You don't look like Inquisition, but if you're here to start trouble, I have a few friends up the canyon rim that put a stop to that. Svetya gave him a steely look before answering. I've had several recent attempts on my life, so you'll forgive my caution. Young, but had more than her share of troubles, Milos thought as he nodded slowly. Fair enough. Sounds familiar. Sit down, please. Just keep your hands where I can see them. As long as you do the same, Svetya said, and pacing over to the map-covered crate and taking a seat, her back rigid with tension. Now let's talk. Milos barked out a laugh. Ah, I can see why Jack bothered. You don't waste time, do you? Frustration flared behind Svetya's controlled expression. I'm sorry, but I've wasted enough time in Argentport. Every day I delay is another day Yushkov stays in power, another day that my people burn. Milos winced. The roar of the emerald hellfire and the bubbling screams of his friends and their families ringing in his ears. Of course. And that's why I'm here. Svetya blinked. To help me? Here's where we find out. Milos shook his head, sitting down across from her. No, not you. The people of Kosal. Svetya started to speak, but Milos held up a hand. Hear me out. I don't like crowns. Never have. Doesn't matter if it's worn by a king, or an Orhan, or a Urun. Orin, Svetya supplied, lightly stressing the last syllable. Orin. Right. Anyway, a crown puts too much power in the hands of too few folks. Milos met Svetya's gaze, his voice hardening. But I like tyrants and murderers less. I've watched people burn too. and seeing good men and women cut down by fanatics. There was a long pause. As Svetya considered this, looking up, she asked, "And if I'm a bad queen, no better than Yushkov?" Milos raised his eyebrows. "If you're asking that question, you're already way ahead of him in my book. Besides," he shrugged, "if you make a mess of things, there will be others, like me, ready to step up." That's what tyrants never seem to understand. The power you wield is on loan from your people. If you abuse it, we take it back. "That sounds like something my father would have said," Svetya murmured, half to herself. Milos blinked away the memory of a large, warm hand on his shoulder and didn't respond. The silence stretched the cavern quiet save for their breath. Just as Milos was about to speak, Svetya reached a decision. Nodding, she held out her hand and said, "I understand. If you're willing to work with me, I could use experienced fighters like yourself. Innocent people are hurting. My people." "We can help them together," Milos replied, standing. "I can't offer an army, but every one of my rebels is worth 10 of Yushkov's mob. They're tough, stubborn veterans." Svetya smiled for the first time, relief playing across her face as she shook her ally's hand. "Sounds like they will get along just fine with my guard. Thank you." "Not in it for thanks," Milos replied, reaching down to pull a dark bottle and 2 glasses from his pack. "It's the right thing to do. Now," he poured a finger of amber liquid into each glass and set one in front of Svetya. "A drink to seal the deal." As Svetya reached for the tumbler, Milos added, "This is strong stuff, distilled in Kherson. You may want to take it slow." Svetya laughed, throwing her head back in surprise and amusement. When her shoulders stopped shaking, she took the glass, knocked back the contents, and slammed the glass down on the map. Grinning, she said, "You've never been to Coastal, have you?"